1.
Good evening, everybody. Mrs. Gangemi here. I hope you can all hear me and see me. Please bear with us. This technology is a little crazy. I'm at home and I'm being supported by Mr. Calderwood, our technology coordinator from his home, Mrs. Grayson, yay, Mrs. Grayson is back, our principal from her home, and Mrs. Gibaldi, our supervisor of special services from her home. So welcome to 2020 technology. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to walk you through what our current plan looks like. I'm going to kind of talk about how we got to where we are, what our options are, what we've decided on, what the components of that will look like, and then at the very end I will take questions. If you do have a question, you can type it in the chat feature, and then Mrs. Grayson and Mrs. Gibaldi will relay those questions to me at the end. You may want to wait because I do go into quite a bit of detail, and you may find that your question is answered before we get to the end of the slideshow. Before we begin, I want to thank the committee that has been working diligently through the month of June and July with me in order to put this plan together. We have Mrs. Ventresca, Mrs. Vidro, Mrs. Paskowitz, Mrs. Evans, and Mr. Jubelhauer, 5 of our teachers. We have 2 parents, Ms. Soralik and Mrs. Saunders, our school nurse, Mrs. Sauer, our school facilities coordinator, Mr. Mathis, and then we also have our school physician, our school SRO, Mr. Sanzari. So we have quite a few people helping us put this together. So with no further ado, Mr. Calderwood, if you could pull up the presentation. All right, are we ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So how did we get here? I'm not going to identify every single bullet on the screen, but if you go back to March 9th, that's when Governor Murphy announced a state of emergency as well as a public health emergency. 4 days later, we made the decision to close all the schools in Ocean County, and 3 days after that, Governor Murphy closed all the schools in New Jersey. From that point on, once a month, he has extended the state of emergency by 30 days. As you can see, on June 26th, he made an announcement that schools would open in September, and then 6 days later extended the state of emergency again. And then just last week, he made an announcement that parents could opt for full virtual learning. That was a little bit of a curveball to us because we had always assumed that that was going to be an option. And then he said, no, it wasn't. And then he said, yes, it was. So that's sort of an example of how things are changing, how rapidly things are changing and evolving. So that's why it's been quite a chore to put something together here.
Mrs. Gangemi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just hit the present button to make it full screen? Thanks.
Yes, I can. Better?
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so when we look ahead to the 2020-2021 school year options, there's essentially 3 options. One would be full in-person learning, basically normal schooling, typical looking learning environment. The second one would be the full remote learning. You will notice throughout the presentation that I interchange the words remote, online, and virtual. It all means the same thing, but basically fully remote, not in the building at all. And then the third option is a hybrid learning environment, which is basically a combination of in-person and remote learning. Full in-school learning is obviously the best choice, right? Students are in school with staff and their friends. It's better for you all as parents. It's a full day of learning, and all the resources that we're able to offer at TES are available to students. What are the negatives? Well, unfortunately, you can see that the cons list is longer than the pros at this time. One of the things that I keep hearing a lot, and I so totally understand it, is parents saying, my child needs to be back in school so they can socialize and interact with their friends. The reality is that that is not going to happen during any in-person learning, at least for the foreseeable future. There will be no group or partner work, will be social distancing. If we were to try and bring everyone in, we would have to add an additional class at every grade because of the social distancing rules. We have already set up our classrooms with the maximum amount of desks that can go in them and comply with social distancing. And the numbers range from 9 to 12 students in a classroom. If we set up additional classes, and we would need one for every grade, which means 7 classrooms, we would need additional teaching staff. There will absolutely be very strict requirements for masks. I'm going to go into that in detail in a later slide. It's not going to be a normal learning experience. That's just where we are in this country right now with COVID-19. And given all of the requirements, particularly for space, it's just not a feasible option to have everyone in school every day at this time. Full remote learning, what are the pros of that? No concerns about sanitizing and disinfecting, which the requirements for sanitizing and disinfecting are immense. They are timely and they are costly. Less cost, obviously, due to less need for staff equipment and supplies. We are going to have to, regardless of what plan we land on, we are going to have to hire an additional custodian in order to keep up with what needs to be done. If everyone's at home, we don't have any confusion about symptoms, right? So when someone is sneezing and running a low-grade fever, is it COVID-19? Is it the flu? Is it strep? Is it, who knows, right? It could just be anything. And students aren't forced to social distance and spend all day in their classrooms. The cons of that, if you're fully remote or you have really no in-person interaction, we can have technology issues, and it clearly is a big problem for parents. Hybrid learning, we're hoping, will take the best of both and put them together to create the best possible experience for our children. Obviously, it gives us the ability to give students some in-person learning. We can manage the social distancing within classrooms in the school building, and there's some semblance of normalcy. Clearly, it will still be scheduling issue. It'll still create scheduling issues for parents. Please understand, from the beginning to the end of this presentation and every moment moving forward, we are very, very aware of the scheduling issues. If there was a way around this, we would not do it the way that we're planning on doing it. This is not going to be a normal school year. There's no way to know when normalcy will return, when schools will be able to go back to doing things the way they've done in the past. We just all have to be prepared for that and be flexible. And students and parents are going to have to be very disciplined and responsible in following the educational schedule on remote learning days. In the spring, we were thrown into it with no notice, and the teachers, for the most part, did a really, really good job getting things up and running. We had issues, though. We had issues with parents who had technology problems. We had issues with students who didn't want to wake up and do the work. We had issues where parents had to work and couldn't be there staying on top of their child. We understand this. The schedule we will create will be very structured, but at the same time, it will be flexible to try and accommodate everybody's needs. So after we spent the better part of a month working on what we could manage and what we were allowed to do and how to move things, this is what 2020, 2021 will look like as we know right this minute. We will do the hybrid schedule. And I'm going to go into each one of these on an individual slide. We will run a cohort model, which I will explain. We will practice strict social distancing. Students will have lunch in their classroom. Masks will be required, and I have a whole slide to talk about that, but it's very important to know right off the bat that masks will be required. There will be daily screening for entry to the school for everyone, staff, students, and visitors. There will be almost no visitors to the building. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to really restrict who comes in and out of the building. Frequent cleaning and sanitizing. There will be no breakfast club, AM wrap, or aftercare. And please know that we completely understand that this is an imposition on parents. But again, with the rules that we have to follow and the requirements that are in place, I don't see how you run aftercare and have children have to sit 6 feet apart on a cafeteria bench for 3 hours. It just doesn't make sense. Plus you're mixing kids. We'll be utilizing multiple points of entry and exit, so you can expect that a new arrival and dismissal protocol will be coming out. And then transportation we'll talk briefly about. Remember that we don't own our buses. They are owned by Durham. Durham has their own protocol for how they're doing things, but we will speak a little bit about the part that we do have control over. So what will a hybrid schedule look like? Students who have opted for in-school learning, in other words, the hybrid schedule, as opposed to full remote learning, will be divided into 2 groups per grade. Group A will attend school on Monday and Tuesday. Group B will attend school on Thursday and Friday. Wednesday will be an all virtual learning day. Siblings will be scheduled to attend in the same group. At this time, we intend and expect that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday will be full days following a regular schedule. There is the possibility that that could change. I'm starting to hear many districts doing early dismissals on the days when students are in order to accommodate scheduling, cleaning, etc. As of now, we are talking about full days. So I spoke a little bit earlier about a cohort model. This is really the central premise to our plan, is to minimize movement around the building, to minimize who comes into contact with whom, so that in the event that we have an issue, we're able to contain it rather than shut the whole school down. That's the hope, fingers crossed. So students will be in a small group in the classroom. They will have little to no movement around the building. They'll come in the morning through their designated door and they'll go right to their classroom. They will have lunch in the classroom. As I mentioned earlier, lunch will be delivered to the rooms. Students will order in the morning, which actually is just going back to something we used to do several years ago. They make their selections in the morning rather than in the line in the cafeteria. We are going to strongly encourage students and staff actually to make online payments to their accounts rather than using cash. The food service company is very leery of handling cash. So we're going to really try and encourage everyone to make online payments if at all possible. At this time, our plan is that specials will be in the classroom where the students will remain, and the special area teacher will stream into the classroom. So in other words, the special area teacher will be in another room. They will be streaming live onto the large screen at the front of the classroom and instructing from there. The students will be in their classroom at their desks participating in whatever activity or instruction that the special area teacher is delivering. One exception to that would be 1 day a week of phys ed, where we will permit them to go out onto the playground with Mr. Smith, obviously weather permitting. And the playground will be separated into 3 spaces. The equipment cannot be used, but we will be separating the playground off so we can have a class in each area, which I think I'm speaking about in a slide about recess actually. Related services for those students who receive them, such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech, will take place right in the hallway outside of the student classroom. Students will not be traveling from their classroom to the speech room or the OT-PT room, and they will be individual services, with a possible exception if you have some students from the same classroom receiving the same service. Up to 3 of them may receive that service at the same time, as long as they are maintaining the social distancing of 6 feet in the hallway. Social distancing, a term everybody's probably totally sick of hearing about because it's all you hear on the news. On buses, students will be required to wear a mask, and students will be seated as far apart as possible given the number of students riding. In hallways, students will be required to wear a mask, and in class, student desks are measured off 6 feet apart. I mentioned previously there will be no small group work. All the small group tables have been removed from the classrooms. There will be no sitting on the rugs. Students must sit in their desks, well, in their chairs, at their desks, and no group or partner work. Now, the last 2 bullets that are bolded are important. When a student is sitting at their desk and there's no one walking around, they will be permitted to take their mask off. However, again, we are going to strongly encourage that they wear them at all times. And our motto is, you move, you mask. So the only time that a student may remove their mask is when they are sitting at their desk, because our desks are socially distanced. Other than that, masks will be required at all times for students. Aha, masks. Speaking about masks, all staff and actually all adults in the building and on school property will be required to wear masks at all times unless they are alone in a room. So for example, if the nurse is alone in her office, I don't think that's likely, she could take her mask off. If a teacher goes to a small office to record a video for students and she's alone in there, she can remove her mask, but otherwise staff will have to wear a mask at all times. We just talked about student requirements for masks. The only exemptions will be documentation from a medical professional. Without a medical professional exemption, the mask protocol must be followed. Staff or students may opt for a face shield, but we are being told by the medical professionals that face shields are not protective in the way that masks are. So anyone wearing a face shield will also have to wear a mask. Staff may choose to wear masks with a clear middle. You may have seen them being advertised for sale on the internet, etc. We are going to order some of those for our service providers, particularly our speech pathologists, where it's especially crucial for students to be able to see their mouth. Repeated failure to follow mask protocol will result in a student being required to participate in all virtual learning. We are well aware that this is going to be a challenge, getting students to wear their masks all the time, but it is vital to keeping everybody safe, particularly if you have a teacher in a classroom with 11 students and the students are constantly taking off their masks and walking around and touching things, and so forth and so on. Obviously, we're not going to make someone move to all virtual learning the first time they don't have their mask on, or probably even the second. First time a warning, second time we'll probably call home and just ask you to please remind them what the mask protocol is. If it becomes a chronic problem, we will require that they go to all virtual learning. Parents will be required to provide a mask for their child. We will have disposable masks for children who forget them, but really it's better if your child has a cloth mask that you can launder. So we are considering having a mask fundraiser similar to what a lot of districts are doing, with masks with our logo on them, but we haven't gotten that far yet. Anybody entering the building for any reason will be required to wear a mask, and anyone on TES property not following the mask protocol will be asked to leave. I mentioned this specifically, and I hope needlessly, when thinking about arrival and dismissal. One of the beautiful, lovely things about Tuckerton is that parents congregate outside school before and after school. Conversations with other parents, with teachers, with administration is one of the things that I love so much about Tuckerton. And I don't want to say that we can't have that, because I think it's an integral part of our school culture. However, people will have to wear masks, and if they're not willing to wear masks, it's certainly their right to say, I'm not going to wear a mask, but then they are going to be asked to not be on our school property. Visitors. We're going to very much limit the visitors that come in and out of the building. So if you come to school to drop something off that your child has forgotten, their lunch, their instrument, their sneakers, their homework, whatever, you will be buzzed into the main entrance foyer and asked to put whatever it is in the drop box that will be at the bottom of the stairs. You will not be coming up the stairs and into the main office. If you're bringing your student late, please don't do that. But if you're bringing your student late, we're only going to admit your student, and you will have to temperature scan your student in the main office. There will be a device, I believe, that it looks like an iPad. They just stand in front of it for 3 seconds, flashes green, they're good to go. Obviously, if you're bringing a very young student or a student with some type of disability or special need, we will send a staff member down to get them. If you need to pick your child up early, you will show your identification on the camera and again be admitted to the main entrance foyer to wait for your child. An exception to that would be if your child is ill, in which case either the nurse or another staff member, or if your child is very young, will bring them down to you. But for all three of those cases, we're not going to be bringing parents up into the building. Contractors, consultants, any other visitors that may come, which hopefully will be very, very minimal, will be temperature scanned in the main entrance foyer. And then once they get into the main office, they will be required to complete a screening questionnaire and then sign in indicating where they're going to be in the building. And they will be accompanied by a district staff member. The purpose of that and of having them sign in indicating where they're going to be is should something happen where we have a potential case of COVID, we need to be able to do contact tracing. So we're going to need to know where everybody is that is in the building. Frequent cleaning. If you haven't noticed already from your time in our building, we have probably the cleanest school building I've ever had the pleasure of being in. We get comments on it frequently from visitors, from state officials, DOE officials. We have a very, very clean building. However, these are not ordinary times. So students will be required to frequently hand wash or hand sanitize before and after lunch, after recess, when they come in the morning, after using the bathroom, and potentially more times. All classrooms will have hand sanitizer, and all classrooms that have sinks, which is actually quite a lot of them, will be equipped with hand soap. Classrooms that have sinks or bathrooms will be equipped with a sanitizing spray so that they can be sprayed between uses by students or staff. Any class that has a bathroom will be expected to primarily do hand washing as opposed to hand sanitizing with a sanitizer. It's just more efficient. It's cleaner, and really we don't want to overuse the hand sanitizer any place that we can avoid it. We will set up a multiple time a day cleaning schedule for the hallway bathrooms for students in rooms that do not have bathrooms. That is primarily our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th classrooms. But we will have our custodial staff going into them multiple times a day to clean them. Common areas such as the library, art room, gym, steam room, etc. will be closed, and cafeteria, so that we don't have to be constantly cleaning those as well. The main office will be disinfected daily, and preschool and kindergarten rooms will receive additional cleaning and disinfecting just because that is the nature of the beast with our little ones. Daily screening. Everyone will be required to daily screen in order to enter the building. You will get your temperature taken. I'm going to go into a little more detail of how that's going to look. And your temperature must not exceed 100 degrees. So for students, temperature checks will be done before they get on the bus. It's important to understand that if your child rides the bus, please don't send your 3rd grader to the bus stop alone, because if they are exhibiting visible symptoms that can be related to COVID-19 and or they have a temperature over 100 degrees, they are not going to be allowed to get on the bus. We will temperature screen students before they get out of their car in the drop-off lanes, before walkers come into the building, and staff will be screened as they enter the building. They will enter through one entrance only, the main entrance, and they will be screened via the automated temperature screener that I described a little bit ago. There will be, a screening questionnaire that must be completed. Staff will need to do it daily, either before they get to work or when they get to work. Students will need to have it done by parents prior to arrival at school, and anyone entering the building will need to do it when they get to the main office. Going back to the student questionnaire, it's going to be 4 questions. It's going to be very simple. Basically, the questions will be the CDC recommended questions. Have you tested positive for COVID? Have you been in close contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID? Are you exhibiting any of the following symptoms? And there's a list, and if you've been watching, that list keeps expanding. It's up to like 9 things now. And then the 4th question will simply be, have you recently traveled or been in contact with anyone who's traveled to any of the states that are on the current quarantine advisory list? I believe that list is currently 31 other states. So if you have traveled to one of those states, you are required to quarantine for 14 days upon return. The student questionnaire will be available to be filled out by, I believe we're setting it up to be filled out by 8 o'clock the night before. You can fill out the questionnaire for multiple students at once. So if you have more than one child in our school, you can fill it out for all of them at once. And my understanding is it can be done on any type of device, including your phone. Any student or staff member who displays symptoms that are unexplainable otherwise, in other words, if you are a known asthmatic and we have documentation that you are an asthmatic and it is allergy season and you are sneezing, that's explained by another condition. But if that is not in place and it is one of the symptoms that is on the COVID-19 related CDC list, they will be sent home immediately. They will be first taken to an isolation room, which essentially is going to be a room where anyone who's waiting to leave will be. It will be staffed, the children will be masked, and we will be waiting for their parent to come get them. Again, those are CDC requirements. Very, very important. Parents need to make sure they have backup plans for picking up their children in the event they're unavailable. I can't tell you how many times we've had a child, vomiting all over the place, and we call a parent and it's 3 hours before someone gets there if we can even reach them. This just heightens the importance of making sure that you have really good, adequate emergency contact information that you provide to us at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, we will have no after-school activities until social distancing is no longer required. I already mentioned no before or after care. We will not be able to permit outside groups to use our facilities. Basketball, there's a basketball rec league that uses our building most of the school year. We will not be able to permit that. And use of playground equipment won't be permitted, which if any of you have driven by the school lately, you can see that the preschool playground is going in, and it breaks my heart to not let them use it. But unfortunately, the guidelines state that if you use playground equipment between every group, you have to wipe it all down. And that's just not feasible or possible for us to do. So it's going to be taped off. As far as arrival and dismissal, this is just sort of a high-level explanation. We are still working on the full details and schedules. We will be using multiple doors, as I mentioned earlier. We're looking at whether to have bussers come in 1 or possibly 2 doors. We are looking at using the door at the ramp and also what was the walker door last year for people coming in the pickup lane, and potentially moving the walkers around to the old main entrance so that we're using 5 doors instead of 2 or 3. Staff will be stationed at all doors for hand sanitizer and to monitor traffic flow. We are looking to see if we can make it work that we dismiss preschool maybe 10 minutes early, kindergarten 5 minutes early, and then everyone else in order to stagger students. One of the very strong recommendations has been to stagger your arrival and dismissal times. That becomes very problematic for us because of the buses and preschool and everything else. So we're going to try and figure out the best way to do it. I mentioned this already. I'm going to ask people not to congregate at the doorways, and parents will be asked to wear masks. We've put together a survey. Many of you filled out the initial survey that I sent out asking you for what you were thinking about which option you would choose. When we sent that out, it was about a month ago. Things have changed significantly since then, and continue to change. So I got 173 or something like that responses out of about 327 students, so slightly more than half. This one we're going to need everyone to answer. It's going to be very simple. Your name, first and last, your child's name, first and last, their grade level in September, and then will you be opting for the hybrid learning environment? Yes, no. Will you be opting for the full remote learning? Yes, no. And then the final question, I want to really explain this because I don't want it to confuse people. It says, if a full 4-day-a-week learning environment in person is offered, would you send your child? Yes, no. That is not something we are offering at this time. However, if it were to happen that we were to get the results back from this survey and 45% of my kids were going to be doing virtual, I might possibly be able to bring the remaining students in every day. So I don't want to 1000% rule out the possibility that we could have kids in 4 days a week, but it's only possible if enough people opt out of any type of in-person learning. So you will notice the very first sentence of the survey says you are being asked to commit to a learning environment on this survey until such time as school can return to a normal learning environment. It's important that whatever we set up, we're able to maintain. The fourth bullet down here says you'll be asked to indicate if you will use school transportation. I wound up not putting that on the survey, so when you don't see it, that's why. If you don't answer, we will be calling you. We will be hounding you. We will be chasing you down. I suspect that those of you who are in the meeting tonight will not fall into that category. But as I said, I had about 155 students for whom I got no response, and we have to know exactly what everybody's plans are. And then once we have all that information, we will move as quickly as we can to assign your child to a Monday, Tuesday, or a Thursday, Friday grouping to let you know what that grouping is so that you can start to plan and make arrangements. But we obviously need to have all of the responses in order to make those schedules. I think that's the majority of what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. At this time, if you have questions, if you haven't already typed them into the chat, please do so, and Mrs. Grayson will start to feed them to me. And if I think of anything else, or if any of your questions trigger something else, I will be more than happy to share it with you.
Okay, so I do have a question. One question came in, which I answered directly because it was specifically about looping.
Okay.
But the second question, good evening, everybody, by the way, it's Mrs. Grayson. The second question was specifically about doors. Will you still have the same security with all the new entrances / doors?
That is an outstanding question, and it is one of my biggest issues with this whole situation. I would like to tell you that we will be as locked down as we normally are, which is very locked down. I can't in good conscience say that to you, no. The doors, so the entire staff will have to enter through the main entrance, so that will eliminate, people coming in and out early. However, if we have to use 5 or 6 doors for entrance and exit, the best that I can promise you is that they will be manned by staff at all times. There will not be any doors that are unlocked. They will all still be locked during the day. But yes, intrinsically, by having traffic flow in and out of multiple doors, you do lessen the fidelity or the integrity of your security.
Okay, another question came in. With a large number of holidays falling on a Monday, will any adjustments be made?
It's so funny that you asked that question, and not funny, haha, but ironic, because that question came up in my staff, or before my staff meeting yesterday, and I took the calendar out and counted them, and very bizarrely, there are exactly the same many of Mondays off as there are Fridays off during the year, and that number is 8. So it will be totally balanced.
Okay, and just to let you know, we're up to about 6 questions so far in the chat. So the next question is, my son was a 2nd grader last year. Will this year's remote learning look differently?
Yes, it will look very different. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, by and large, the teachers did a good job, but I did receive some concerns from parents, some complaints from parents that we tried to address, and we're not always 100% successful. We are going to be, and the teachers have already been informed of this, we are going to be creating protocols and expectations for what the remote learning will look like. One of the big issues that that was pointed out to us that we will be addressing is a two-pronged issue. One is the issue of teacher websites, and some of them being very easy to navigate, some of them being impossible to navigate, some of them having not enough information, some of them having too much information. So we will have very clear protocols of what teachers need to put on there. Secondly, we will have common platforms that teachers are communicating with. So rather than having teachers communicate with you through 4 or 5 or 6 different methodologies, there's going to be a streamlined procedure so that you will know what to expect. The bulk of everything is going to come through Google Classroom, but every teacher will be utilizing the same platforms. And thirdly, every teacher will be doing face-to-face instruction online every virtual day. Now, caveat to that, if you choose fully virtual, or even if you choose the hybrid on the days that your child is at home, I cannot at this time promise you that the teacher delivering the virtual instruction will be the classroom teacher. That is a scheduling nightmare that we are trying to wade through right now. But virtual days will consist of online face-to-face instruction for at least a portion of the day. Yes, so the hope is that everything will look much, much different and better.
Good evening, everybody. This is Mr. Calderwood. I just wanted to, we have a lot of questions rolling in, which is great. If you're unsure how to ask a question, I have the feed up on my mobile phone, and all you have to do is in the top right corner, there are 2 icons. One is there are little chat bubbles with a question mark. You can tap on that and type in your question. And also on the web version, you should see the same little icon, which is the 2 chat bubbles with a question mark. Type in your name if you can, and we'll try to get to all of your questions tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, are all preschool students who registered enrolled, or will there be too many with new guidelines?
At this time, everyone who has registered has a slot. My hope is that that will not be an issue, and actually we have plenty of space still. And let me just add on to that. If you are a parent who has registered your preschooler, please feel free to call school and just double check if you're concerned about that.
Okay. Do you need parent volunteers?
No, and I appreciate the offer, but in the vein of trying to minimize outside people in the building, we're going to try and figure it out with our staff. But thank you so much for being willing.
I believe you answered a lot of or spoke to this question already when describing. The question was, will virtual learning include virtual instruction from teachers or just assignments? But I feel you kind of elaborated on that.
Virtual instruction as well as assignments. It will be a mix.
Will the students have access to the library to take out books?
We are still trying to sort that out. I have done a lot of reading about what has to happen for it to be safe. Theoretically, books, if they sit for 3 days, are okay. The issue becomes if we let children come into the library and wander around and browse and pick books out and look at them and then put them back because it's not what they like, which is what a library experience should be. It becomes very difficult to figure out how to either take a certain set of books and sanitize them, or do we then have to wait 3 days before anyone else can come in the library? So at this point, I would say the answer to that is no. Every class does have a classroom library and teachers will be working on their own protocols. My hope is that there comes a point when we can figure out how to open up our library.
Another question regarding the virtual, same thing though, I think that you identified some questions, so this might be someone to reach out to specifics. The question was, what will virtual look like? Can you hear me still?
I can hear you, go ahead.
Okay. What will virtual look like? A teacher teaching them, or how spring looked? Also for hybrid, what will the other 3 days look like?
So I think sort of asked
The
and
off days
answered.
or doing schoolwork on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think sort of asked and answered, but and I will be very candid with you. At this point, I don't have more detail. I can tell you how as administration we envision setting it up, and what our expectations will be. And our expectations will be on virtual days, it will be a mix of virtual instruction and assignments.
Question regarding scheduling of siblings. I think that you had addressed it in the previous slides about siblings would.
Yes.
The question does elaborate though to, does this include older siblings in Pinelands?
Boy, oh boy, we've been around this so many times, and I wish I could promise you that the answer to that was yes. We're going to try to include and coordinate with siblings. Pinelands hasn't put their plan out yet. And so I can't really speak to that too much about what their plan is going to look like. If we can, we will, but I can't promise you. It just becomes so problematic.
Will the teacher be able to help my child if they need help, or are they stuck in one place in the room?
The teacher can move around, the students not so much, but yes, the teacher will be able to go to the student's desk. Theoretically, the student can go to the teacher's desk, but really it's always better if the teacher is the one moving around the room and not sitting at their desk. But yes, they will definitely be able to help.
I apologize if I'm cutting out also. I think I'm having a little difficulty on my end. If a staff member or a student develops COVID, what will the procedure be for the students who may be exposed?
So that is a procedure that we are still finalizing, or fine-tuning would probably be more appropriate. Mrs. Sauer is on our committee and is actually in charge of that piece of it. As of right now, the expectation is that if someone develops symptoms that appear to be COVID related or has a COVID positive test, anyone who has been in what the CDC refers to as close contact, which means within 6 feet of them for 10 minutes or more, regardless of whether they're wearing a mask, will be required to quarantine until the person with symptoms has either completed the recommended quarantine period or provided us with a COVID negative test. It's very important to understand that we cannot compel anyone to get a COVID test. Obviously, if you, let's say your child comes to school, they're fine, at 10 o'clock, they spike a fever, we call you, you come and get them right away, and you say, I'm going to take them and get a COVID test because A, I want to know if they have it or not, and B, I want them to be able to go back to school. If you get it and 3 days later you get the results and they're clean, everybody who's been in close contact can come back. But without that, we have to wait out the quarantine periods. I'm not going to go into detail right now about the quarantine periods, but there is a chart which we have received from the New Jersey Department of Health that basically is a tiered explanation of the length of the quarantine period, and it's based on COVID test or no test, symptomatic or asymptomatic. It goes on and on. So we do have guidelines from the Department of Health that we will be following. Again, this becomes very, very tricky. Let's say that you have a child who's a 3rd grader. They ride the bus to school. They have a sibling in 5th grade and in 8th grade. They develop a fever at 10 a.m. in the morning. They're good when they get there. They develop a fever. We have to potentially quarantine everyone in their classroom, anyone on the bus who was within 6 feet of them, anyone in the siblings' classroom, and anyone in the sibling who's in the junior high's classroom and bus. It becomes, that is why we are so intent on maintaining these cohorts and keeping children in a classroom with very little movement. Because if they move, for example, if they went to the cafeteria or if they went to the gym, or if they just were walking around the building for their other specials, now we're starting to say, all right, they were in the music room. Who else was in the music room? Anyone who was in the music room that day could potentially have to be quarantined. And that would literally probably mean shutting the school down. So we're trying to avoid that problem At the same time, we're trying to be able to make it so that if people do have to quarantine, they can get back as quickly as possible.
Okay, I'm actually going to ask Mrs. Gibaldi to take over with some of the questions. I also wanted to let you know that Mr. Calderwood switched you over to the live camera instead of the desktop that you're
okay.
presenting. Okay.
So I can unpresent and everyone can see me waving my hands around.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. Okay, will there be flexibility with the remote learning day schedule, knowing that many parents work and need to make accommodations, especially with younger students who need assistance?
So yes, a little bit earlier when I was addressing the question about what the virtual learning would look like as compared to last spring, I spoke to the fact that the schedule is going to be very structured, but at the same time very flexible. We clearly understand that parents have to work, that young children need assistance, and quite honestly, some of our older children don't want to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, although we really want them to do that. We had 6th graders turning in assignments at midnight in the spring. So one of the very important protocols that we have to build in is flexibility. So the answer to that is yes. There are a number of things we are going to try and do with that. But it is at the forefront of our mind and our planning.
Okay, will there be 3-year-old pre-K? Also, when will we be notified if you received a pre-K application online registration?
So yes, there will be 3-year-old pre-K. And as I mentioned just a bit ago, anyone who registered has received a spot. My understanding is that all online registrations were finalized and accepted, and if yours wasn't, Ms. Houlihan reached out to you to get what other information she needed. But again, if you just need verification or clarification, please feel free to call school. And P.S., when you call school, understand that there is no one in the main office, so you will have to leave a message. And then Mrs. Lank in the main office comes in or picks up the messages from home, and then she forwards them to the appropriate person for response.
If it is determined that a student has to quarantine, maybe due to sickness or travel, will they be able to go virtual for those 2 weeks and then go back hybrid, or would it be treated as sick days?
No, if they're able to participate, they will go virtual for the quarantine period.
Will the lower grades receive devices? Will those teachers use Google Classroom?
So at this time, every student in 2nd through 6th grade will be receiving a Chromebook. 1st grade, Mr. Calderwood, do you want to jump in on 1st grade and kindergarten?
Yes, right now we do not have enough iPads to cover kindergarten and 1st, so we are asking parents if you already have a device. I believe we'll be sending out a survey soon. If you have a device, please let us know that you're covered. We want to make sure that those who truly do not have devices have the opportunity to get one from us.
So just to elaborate on that, thank you, Mr. Calderwood. Just to elaborate on that, our intent is that every single student will either have a school provided device or one that they already have at home that they're comfortable using. And yes, Google Classroom is going to be the platform for everyone.
I'm sorry. I scrolled and I'm not in the right spot.
That's okay. Do you want me to go into a little more detail about why we chose one platform?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you do that?
So, yeah, sorry. So we had a discussion in the spring, you know, and as a parent of 3 kids who are in a completely different district, we feel your pain because they were on 2 different platforms. My wife was teaching from another platform. So we wanted to try to streamline as much as possible so that if you have a child in 1st grade or 2nd grade and a child in 5th and 6th grade, we're all working in the same platform and we're not having to worry about training. We will be making videos available to help you, to get you started, to also allow your student to help you. And we recognize that not every home is the same and everybody's technical expertise is not the same. So we are working as hard as we can to make things as easy as possible for everyone, and not only the student, but also the parents.
Thank you, Mr. Calderwood.
Okay. On the child off 2-day of the week, I guess the 2 days are off of the week, are they remote learning the days or only on Wednesdays?
No, there will be 2 days in person, 3 days remote learning. So they will be being provided instruction 5 days a week.
If you choose full remote learning, is that for the entire school year? Can you choose full remote learning and then opt into hybrid learning during the school year?
I'm going to say that if you choose remote, it's remote until such time as school goes back to normal. That's our plan. However, if there is some kind of very extenuating emergency type circumstance, I'm obviously always available to discuss that. Let me just be clear about why we're saying that. The problem that we face is, as I mentioned very early on, we have classrooms already set up ready with a maximum amount of seats we can put in them, and it's between 9 and 12. So if I have a classroom that can only seat 9, and I can split a class into 2 groups of 9 or 2 groups of 8, that's great. But then if all of a sudden 3 students decide they want to come back from virtual and go into in person, I don't have any place to put them. That's the entire reason for saying you have to pick and commit. It's not to be a pain. It's not to say, well, you know, you might find that whatever you chose totally doesn't work for you. It's because logistically it could put us in a hot mess, quite frankly. So, but again, there are extenuating circumstances.
And then the opposite of that, if they choose in-school learning and it doesn't work for whatever reason during the school year, will they be able to change to remote learning?
Same whole scenario I just gave you, except I will tell you that that's a lot easier for us to accommodate because we are now not adding more bodies into the building, we are removing.
Okay, in the event a quarantine is necessary for the child, will attendance policy be changed to accommodate that?
Again, if a child is quarantined, the expectation is going to be that they are participating fully virtually. As long as they meet the expectations for participation that we put together and share, then they will be considered present on those days that they are quarantined. If it develops that they are sick and unable to participate, it will be a sick day, just like it would be if they were sick and couldn't come to school. But quarantining will not count as sick days as long as they are participating in the virtual learning.
Okay, I'm just confirming the question or the answer to the question that our siblings at TES will be scheduled on the same days.
Yes.
Yeah.
TES siblings, yes. I cannot promise Pinelands.
Okay, so that actually went with the next question. Then if my child is doing hybrid schooling, can it change, such as the child changing from 2 days to a full virtual or vice versa, which I believe that you just elaborated on? Mm-hmm. If we were, I think this again is going to spiral from that. If we were to pick a remote learning option and then a vaccine was made available, would we be able to switch into a classroom option at that point, which I think you had said if the circumstances change?
Right. So if something happened whereby all of this went away, let's just say, you know, miraculously in January, it's all gone, there's no worries, everything's great, everything opens back up as normal, then we would expect that everybody would come back. So I think that answers that question.
How will the students be split up between the days? By learning style, level, or randomly? So with the AB, how are the classes being determined?
We are working on that. We are looking at learning style, not randomly, that much I will tell you. We are really looking, it becomes complicated, right? We are looking at students who require certain services, trying to group them on the same day, so in the same class, so they can receive those services. We are looking at siblings. We're looking at a number of things. Random is about the only thing we're not looking at. I know there are school districts that are doing it alphabetically, they're doing it geographically, they're doing it all kinds of ways. We're really trying to create the best academic experience in the classroom. And obviously we're also taking a look at social emotional personalities, things that we would always be looking at when creating our class lists.
If teachers are distancing in front of the class, can they remove their mask for a more normal learning environment, which I believe you confirmed during the presentation that the teachers are to remain masked, even with distancing?
Yes, I have to tell you in all honesty that my teachers are not wanting to remove their mask. My teachers are actually more concerned with the fact that students have the option to remove their masks. For all of you who've ever been in an elementary school environment, you know that students cough, sneeze, don't cover their mouths, their noses. Bodily fluids are everywhere. I hate to say that. So adults absolutely will need to wear their masks, and that's for your children's protection. So the answer to that is no.
Okay, so this one combined a couple things in one question. And again, I'm just going to confirm the fact that you had stated that the virtual learning will consist of actual live teaching or a combination of recorded teaching assignments directly from the teaching, not just online assignments. Correct? Okay.
Correct.
And the second part of that question, will there be ongoing testing for staff? Which I believe you also confirmed that you cannot require testing.
No, I cannot compel staff to be tested. I know teachers would prefer that there was ongoing testing, but it has become a very contentious issue countrywide, whether insurance companies will even pay for testing if it's not ordered by a medical professional. It keeps changing. It's yes, then it's no, then it's yes, then it's no. But at the end of the day, I cannot compel anyone to have a test.
Okay, I'd already answered a question privately regarding the confirmation of looping, but this might come up, so I'm just going to ask it for you to confirm. Will we still be looping? Will children have the same teachers this year if there would be year 2 of the loop?
My hope and intention is yes. I am not intentionally breaking up any loops. We have made a first pass at splitting students at each grade level in each class into the 2 cohorts. And at this time, I do not believe we've moved anyone out of a loop. And I feel very, very personally strongly about the importance of looping. So it would be a rare exception if we did that.
Okay, this question is about the hybrid as far as teacher assignment and student placement. The example that they give is if the child has Mrs. Marr, for example, would they have her 2 days and a different teacher on the other 2 days?
Possibly. The problem that exists, just so it's clear, is that if Mrs. Marr, we'll just go ahead and use her as our example, if Mrs. Marr is in the building teaching 4 days a week, she can't be supporting the groups on their virtual days. Wednesday she can. She will support on Wednesday, but she can't support virtually while she's also teaching live. So it is extremely likely, I might almost say certain, that the teacher supporting your student and instructing your student on the 2 virtual days, not the Wednesday, will be a different teacher.
Okay, this question was in regards to recess, which I believe that you did address to some extent in the presentation. Will there be recess this year?
So our current plan is that yes, there excuse me, yes, there will be recess. We will divide the playground. I mentioned earlier the equipment will not be available, but the basketball court and the field will. We are going to divide them into 3 sections. So the field will be divided into 2 with cones and spray paint. And then we will also cone off the basketball court. Our intention is to have 1 grade level at a time out there, which is pretty typically the way we do recess anyway. Each class from the grade, so that would be 2 classes at a time, will be in one of those 3 zones. And again, we're not expecting the classes to be more than like 9 or 10, maybe max 11. So they should have adequate area to play in. I am looking at purchasing individual recess bags with a variety of different balls and things for each classroom, so there's no cross-contamination of you know, soccer ball, kickball, whatever, that type of thing.
With so many masks being worn, are you worried about security issues since we have worked hard on that the last few years?
I'm trying not to be. Again, I think the biggest thing we can do to keep as secure as possible in these crazy circumstances is to really very strictly limit who gets in the building, right? So our staff, we know who they are. We know their voices, we know their mannerisms. Parents, really, you're not going to be in the building hardly at all, if at all. And again, the only visitors that would be coming into the building would be if we have to have someone come in and service the heating and air conditioning, let's just say, and they come in and they have to present their driver's license and get scanned into our system, which is a regular daily practice anyway. So I'm going to say that I don't think that's going to be a huge issue, but I appreciate the question, obviously.
Okay, will hybrid kids be able to take Chromebooks home on virtual days?
Yes. The intent is that your child will take their device home every day. So they will need to put it in their backpack and bring it home with them. And the reason for that is twofold. Obviously, if they're a Monday, Tuesday child, on Tuesday when they go home, they're going to need it for 3 days of learning, and flip-flop that if they're a Thursday, Friday child. The other concern that we factored into that decision is it is possible that we could at a moment's notice be told you have to shut everything down again. And we don't want anyone to be at home without a device. We want to, I mean, I think we did a great job getting devices to people. We loaned out almost 100 devices this spring, including delivering a lot of them to people's homes. But we want to avoid anyone being caught without a device, so devices will go home every day.
Okay, you did answer this, but siblings scheduled on the same day?
Yes.
Okay. Will younger children be provided a Google account to make work submission easier? Last year I had an older kid using Google Classroom to submit classwork and specials, but for my kindergartner I had, I don't know, I had to email, I guess.
Kyle, Mr. Calderwood, can you answer that question?
Yes, so every student is already issued a Google account, whether they know they have it or not. So kindergarten all the way through 6th grade will receive an account. We have a system which is called Clever. Some of you may already be aware of that, which allows them to easily log into whatever they're doing. For kindergarten and 1st grade, we actually give them what are called Clever badges. And if you have a device with a camera, such as an iPad, they can just hold their badge right up to the camera and it'll scan the QR code and log that student in automatically. So they do not need to remember their username and password. We are going to, again, be doing that. But yes, every student will have a Google account.
Thank you, Mr. Calderwood. I suspect that that was less an issue of students not having a Google account and more an issue of the teacher expectations, which, again, we are going to change things up.
Okay, how are they doing virtual instruction 3 days if the teacher is in the classroom 4 of the 5 days with students? Or will 2 days be more of an assigned work that needs to be done? My guess is independently.
I think I've already addressed that. There will be someone giving them some virtual instruction on those virtual days, but there will also be assignments, but there will absolutely be virtual interaction every day. It just won't be the classroom teacher.
Are party celebrations still able to happen? Sending in treats for birthdays?
Oh man, that's one that hadn't crossed my mind yet. Let me think on that one. They're not going to be able to have parents come in, that much I can say with certainty. I don't see why a parent couldn't send in cupcakes for the 10 kids that are in the classroom on the day that their child's birthday is. But that is something that definitely hadn't crossed my desk yet. So I am writing it down and we will have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, and if a teacher is absent, will you be bringing an outside substitute into the building to cover the class for that particular day?
Great question. Probably not, and that's a multi-tiered reason. One is that we want to limit people coming in the building, as we keep saying, and the second is, quite frankly, we can't get subs as it is. And I find it hard to think that anyone's going to want to come sub in an elementary school during this situation. So if a teacher is sick and is not able to come in, we're going to have to shuffle, move, figure it out on the fly. You never know, I might turn out to be a teacher for a day here and there.
You were all caught up with any questions that had been posted.
Oh, wow. Great. Great. Well, I want to again thank all of you for participating. Kyle, how many did we wind up with ultimately?
I think at one point we were close to 60. We're down to about 40 now.
Okay. All right. Well, good. So please let your friends, neighbors, etc. know that, share the information that you got. We will post the recording of this meeting on our website, hopefully tomorrow, so that people who were not able to participate will be able to watch it. If you think of other things, please reach out. I will tell you that it is abundantly clear from the questions that you asked that we need to do a much better job with our virtual instruction, and we pretty much knew that. But we are in the weeds on figuring it out right now. And certainly, please always know that if things are troublesome or not going the way you think they should, or you're having issues, your first stop is always your child's teacher. And if you don't get information that is satisfactory to you, then Mrs. Grayson, the principal, is stop number 2. And I'm the final stop on the route. I'm it. So, but there's plenty of opportunities to get assistance and get help. And as Mr. Calderwood mentioned, we are going to have everyone on common platforms. There will be parent training. Your kids probably know, even though they try and tell you they don't know how to log on, that's a bunch of hooey. They do too know how to log on because they do it every day in school. But we want to make sure to try and eliminate as many barriers, if not all barriers, to kids having a successful experience as we navigate this crazy time that we're in. So if there are no more questions, thank you again. And more
One did come in. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you, Mrs. Gangemi. Question about the survey. When will the survey need to be completed by with our decision? Great question.
It's a great question, a very important question. The survey will go out tomorrow and you will have 1 week to make your decision. And again, please understand that that 1 week is not to pressure you, but it is because we cannot begin to really plan until we know what everyone's doing. So tomorrow is Wednesday, I think. Yeah, Wednesday. So we will issue I actually have the survey ready to go. I might kick it out tonight, you never know, but probably tomorrow morning. And it'll probably be exactly a week. I'll probably say it has to be back in by next Wednesday so that we can start our planning. All right. Thank you again. Have a nice evening and keep your fingers crossed that this goes away sooner rather than later. And again, please always remember, we're always available to talk to you if you have questions and concerns. Thank you very much. Good night.